to Liz Sews. Today I have for you guys the first in my newest series of tutorials on the Cindy Longline bra. I really think this pattern was interesting because it came with the options for longline bra, high-waisted underwear, and then how to combine both of those to make a bodysuit. But for the purpose of this tutorial, we'll just be looking at the bra. So here you can see the bra is made up. I've used stretch fabric in it all along the center bridge as well as the cups, which is what the pattern designer had called for, and then power knit along the sides. The back of the bra is quite a bit longer than most of the ones that I've shown you, and we're using a really long hook and eye tape so that you get a lot of coverage there. I personally really like longline bras. I think they're a lot more comfortable and they look great under more vintage style clothing to help give you a more defined waist. So let's hop down onto the floor, take a look at sizing, and see what are the pieces you need to make this.
Okay, so our first step is going to be to find our size. And in order to do that, we're going to need a couple of measurements. So you're going to want to take your band measurement, and that's going to be sort of here directly under your bust, and you want to make sure you keep that parallel to the floor. Then you're going to make a full bust measurement, so you decide where the biggest portion of your bust is, and you want to take that measurement as well. So full band, and then you're also going to need your waist measurement. So you need those three measurements. So the first thing I did is I highlighted what my band was going to be. So this chart is organized by band, and if it's a 30 band, you're expecting it to be about a 29 to 30 inch measurement there. So in my case, my underbust or band is going to be 33.5, and so that makes me a size 34. So I've highlighted that entire row here. All of these have the same band size. And then I went back up to my full bust measurement, and I got 37, so that's going to put me in a C cup. So I would be probably between a C or D. Now the first time I made this up, I did a C, and I found that a little shallow, so I'm actually going to go ahead and make a D this time. So you can see that it kind of overlaps, right? This is 36 to 37, and this is 37 to 38, so I could be in either one of these. So now this time through, I'm going to use a D cup. And then the last measurement you needed was your waist. My waist sort of fluctuates depending on the time of month, but I can be between like a 30.5 to 31. So I'm probably going to be in between this small and this medium. So you can see where I've highlighted what I did the first time around, and I think this time I'm actually going to go with a D cup, and I'm probably going to go with a small waist because I found it a little bit bigger than I needed it to be. So let's take those measurements and print out a pattern. So the pattern is nested by your band size. So if you're a 34 band, you just print out that 34 pattern, and it's going to actually have all of these cups in it. So if you think you're a little bit bigger on the bottom of your breast but shallower on the top, you can make those adjustments between cup sizes. So I'm going to print out the 34 size set, and you can see that this pattern goes up to a 38 band and a double D cup. So the largest cup you're going to see in here is a 42 to 43 inch full bust measurement. So here is one of the pattern pieces, and one thing that I noticed a lot of people having issues with was thinking that like something was wrong because they're missing a side here. I actually think the way that this pattern is sized is really ingenious, and I absolutely love it. So it might be a little bit tricky here to see, but what you need to do is find the cup size that you want to work with. So in my case, I'm going to start with a 32D up here. So that's this one, and then I need to match it to my waist size. So like I said, I'm going to make a small in my waist here. So that way you have enough of that width to go around your rib cage, but then it does narrow down to what you need it to do on your waist without having to do any extra grading down. So I think that was a really cool idea in her behalf. So I've just lined up my ruler connecting those two dots. We have my bra size up here, which is the 34D, and then my waist size down here, which is a small. And all I have to do is connect those dots. So you're going to go ahead and do that for several of your pattern pieces. You're going to have to do that for, this is the side front. We'll do that for this piece here, which is the center front band. Again, connect your bra size with your waist size. This is going to be the side back band. Again, bra size to waist size. And lastly, the center back band. Same deal, bra size to waist size. So I'm going to go ahead and draw all those lines in and get these pattern pieces cut out. Okay, so here we have all the pieces cut out. You should have 4 for your band and then another 3 for your cup. Now, if you're making the long line bra, this is all you really need to do. You could start sewing right away. If you're going to make the bodysuit, there are a couple more pattern preparations that need to be done, and I will go over those, but I'm going to wait until I do the video series on the bodysuit before I talk about them. But for now, I'm just going to focus on the long line bra. So as I said, if you're making the long line bra, this can be it. You can start now, but I'm going to show you a couple more alterations to the pattern that I think make it a little bit better. So you can see on here that I've marked my seam allowances. For this pattern, the seam allowance is 1/2 inch. If you've watched any of my other tutorial videos, you know that I frequently like to use patterns that have a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And when I was making this bra up for the first time, I did find it a little bit tricky to do a 1/2 inch seam allowance in the cup. Having that 1/4 inch seam allowance just makes these tight curves a little bit easier to manipulate. So one thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to trim off my excess seam allowance in my cut pieces. So I'm going to go along all 3 edges of both of my lower cut pieces, as well as this edge of the upper cut piece. And I'm going to remove a 1/4 inch of a seam allowance from there. So right now it's at a 1/2 inch, and I want to get it down to a 1/4. So this is a little bit tedious of a job, and honestly the best way that I've found to do it is just sort of like use your ruler, find your 1/4 inch and mark, and just do little dots all the way along that curved edge, and then you can connect the dots to find out your 1/4 inch. Once you've marked that 1/4 inch out, it's really just a matter of snipping it off. And then I would make sure to carry over any of these notches that you have, because sometimes you might not see them once you cut off your 1/4 inch. So I'll just cut that one in. Whew, my hand shaking. I'll just cut that in just a little bit so that I will have it. So this is not a step that's necessary. I just found it made it a lot easier for me to handle the fabric. And when I am doing the video tutorial, I will point out areas where I have changed that seam allowance. So if you're just using the 1/2 inch seam allowance that the pattern comes with, I will let you know that what to sew that in. So like I said, I'm going to take off my seam allowance on these 2 cut pieces, the lower portion of the upper cut piece, and then lastly, I'm going to take it along the wire line here. Now the second alteration that I'm going to do to this pattern is just to make it a little bit easier to sew again. So I've marked all of my 1/2 inch seam allowances on these pieces. This one's going to be the one in the center front, which is cut on the fold. That's going to be my fashion fabric, and then I'm going to do the rest of these 3 pieces in a stretchy band material like a power net. And since all of these are relatively straight sides, I've decided that I'm just going to eliminate the pieces altogether and make this one piece. So all you need to do is just overlap these, and you want to make sure that you have your, you marked where your seam allowance is, and you want to make sure you're overlapping like your blue line to your blue line, to sort of as if you had sewn it together. So you should have about 1 inch overlap, and that's what it's going to look like. And then I'm just going to trace this out as one single piece. So once you have these 3 pieces overlapped the way that you like them, I would just throw down a bit of tracing paper on top and then copy over that pattern. So what you're going to end up having is just one single piece here of power net instead of having to do all of these vertical seams. I think that looks a lot more streamlined, and I don't especially because these are straight seams and it's relatively, all the grain lines are going pretty much in the same direction. I don't think you necessarily have to have all of those separate pieces. Okay, so now I've traced out those 3 together. And if I remove those from underneath, you can see what that pattern piece is going to look like now. So just going to be one single piece of fabric that wraps sort of all the way from close to your center front to your back band where your hook and eye tape is going to be. Now the last alteration that I'm going to show on this pattern has to do with that center front piece. So the pattern designer has mentioned that she has particularly wide set chest. And what that means is that her breasts sit further apart. When I made this up, I would say that the way that this pattern is drafted is for about a 3 fingers width in between her breast. So if you're looking down from up above and you can put 3 fingers in between where your 2 mounds of tissue come out, you can go ahead and keep it as it is. However, for me, I have more about a 2 finger distance, or some people even have like a 1 finger distance, or like they touch in the center front. So that's something to be aware of. Knowing that this was particularly wide, I'm going to go ahead and take out about 1/4 of an inch from this fold line in the center front. And that's going to bring mine to about a 2 fingers width distance. If you wanted to bring it down to a 1 finger's width distance, I would take off a 1/2 of an inch from that from that fold line. So you can see I've just drawn that in, and I'm going to snip that off. Now I'm still going to cut this piece on the fold. I'm just making sure that my bridge width is not as wide. So now that we've got the pattern how we want it, I'm going to go ahead and start picking up the fabrics. So here we have all of the pieces cut out. So I have 3 pieces for each cup. So when you're cutting it out, you do need to make sure that you mirror it, right? So if you cut one piece out like this, you need to turn your pattern piece over to cut the other piece out. That way you have fashion fabric going in mirrored directions. I also have the fabric done in this centerpiece here, and this is the one that we cut on the fold, so it would be this piece. And then I have my 2 back pieces cut out of a power net, and this is the one where I've combined those side front, side back, and center back onto one large piece. So the power net here is about 50% stretch. Now for this pattern, she does recommend a 2-way stretch for this fashion fabric here, which is a little bit different than what I normally work with. I normally show you things that use a stable fabric, but this one is stretchy. So what I am using is a mirror stretch satin that I purchased this from Bra Builders. So you can see that it has quite a bit of stretch in this direction and hardly any stretch in this direction. Now we cut it with the stretch going around your body. If you look at these pattern pieces here, they do have arrows written on them, and normally in bras that would be the direction of greatest stretch. However, for this particular pattern, those arrows are trying to indicate the grain line. I find it just easier for myself to think about where I want the stretch to go. So you always want the stretch to go, you know, side to side around your body, since that when you breathe, that's what's going to expand and contract and expand and contract. So again, the stretchiest way is this way, and then I have the stretchiest way going across the body there and across up there. Now I will say that for this pattern, I found it really tricky to remember which piece went where, because both these front center cups and side cups look very, very similar. So the easiest thing that I found to do is just to like mark which ones are my center front cups. So I'll just take a small silk pin and I'll put that into my cups so I can remember which ones are my center front cups. Once you get this 3 pieces constructed into one, then it's obvious what's your center front, right? This is going to be your center front. But before that, so when I'm just sewing these 2 together, that helps me keep track of which side that the bra is supposed to go on. So in addition to our fabric, we are going to need some notions. So for the hook and eye, I purchased stuff called hook and eye tape. So I buy this from Bra Builders, and Bra Builders sells it by the hook, right? So for this case, I think I bought 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I bought 8 hooks, and it all comes in one piece. I have seen this stuff sold by other vendors such as Beware, and I think they do it by the meter. So be aware when you're ordering it what the unit of measurement is from your vendor. So you're going to need that. I thought 8 worked really well for this pattern. 8 hooks high, but you can always make it larger or smaller if whatever your preference is. Next, you're going to need some underwire channeling. I'm using sort of a fluffy version right here, and this is my favorite sort of underwire channeling to use. Sometimes it can have a little bit of sort of bias stretch to it. I don't think this one does, but hey ho. Then you're going to need a band elastic. So this is what's going to go along the bottom of the bra. And it's going to have a picot edge to it. So picot just means it has little bumpy bits. This one is scalloped, but I've also seen it in a more of like a sawtooth way. So I'm going to use this, which is, it looks like 3/4 of an inch, but I think the pattern calls for 1/2 of an inch. This bra is so long, it doesn't really matter which one you use. It's just going to end up like 1/4 inch shorter on me because I'm using this wider elastic. This is actually the bra strap elastic, so it is sort of satiny appearance, and it doesn't have nearly as much stretch as some of these other elastics. So I'm going to be using 1/2 of an inch bra strap elastic, and then you're going to want rings and sliders to go with it. So if you have a 1/2 inch elastic for your straps, you want 1/2 of an inch rings and sliders. If you do wider elastic here, then you need wider rings and sliders. So that's a question that I always get. And then lastly, we need fold over elastic. And this is one you can see there's a line down the center of it, and it's made to fold over, thus the name, the seam allowance to finish it off. And then you will also need a pair of underwires, and the chart from the pattern will tell you which underwire size to use. And for this bra, it requires a long underwire, so make sure that when you're purchasing from bra maker supply or any place like that, you select the long version. You can make it with a shorter underwire, but you'll need to make a couple of alterations to the pattern so that you don't have a lot of excess room in your wire line. So now that we have all of our fabric picked out, we can start sewing. So I've set up my machine with a walking foot, that's this foot right here. And this just helps me, especially with stretchy fabrics or very slinky fabrics, to make sure that both the top and the bottom fabric are moving at the same distance at the same time. Otherwise, you know, sometimes your top fabric or actually your bottom fabric can grow a little bit just because of the way that the feed dogs operate. So I highly suggest using a walking foot if your machine doesn't have a dual feed or something like that. I've got a Schmetz Microtex needle in here. Now, I can't tell you exactly which needles to use because it really depends on your machine and your fabric. I did try this out with that mirror set and it looked to be working really well, but you also might find that you need to use a ballpoint needle or a universal needle or something like that. So you really need to play around with the fabric that you're going to be using to make sure the needle is working fine for your project and not skipping any stitches. For the thread, I'm just using a polyester thread. I would recommend only using a synthetic polyester fiber just because it's a lot stronger, and because when your bra is on, it's under a lot of tension and stretching around your body, and so a cotton thread would be more prone to breakage. Now, in terms of what you need for your machine, all you need is a machine that can do a straight stitch and a zigzag stitch. So you don't need fancy equipment or anything like that, just a machine that can do straight and zigzag stitch, and that's all you need to make a bra. Well, that concludes day 1 of the Cindy Longline bra tutorial. See you tomorrow.